Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Every family has its golden child. In mine, it wasn't hard to figure out who it was. My mother was the reliable one, the hardworking one, the one who carried herself with dignity. But my aunt, her sister, was the opposite. And yet somehow, despite her endless trail of bad decisions, lies, and manipulations, she was always the favorite. Growing up, I could never understand it. My mother had been working since she was 12. She got up every morning to help my grandfather in his little shop, learning how to balance books, count change, sweep floors, and deal with customers. She never asked for anything for herself. Every penny she earned she tucked away, building a little bit of independence for the future. Eventually, she turned that early hustle into her own business. She made something of herself. My aunt, she floated through life like rules didn't apply to her. She never held down a job until she was 26. She stole from her parents constantly, money from my grandfather's wallet, things from around the house she'd pawn off for cash, even groceries. She was always in trouble, always had some drama following her, and always seemed to be the victim in her own story. But my grandmother adored her. It didn't matter if she had wrecked her own life or hurt others along the way, Nan always defended her. And when my aunt started having kids, three of them, each with a different father, Nan spoiled them just the same. They could do no wrong. Their mistakes were overlooked, brushed aside, or even turned into sob stories that Nan would parade around to gain sympathy. Meanwhile, my mom and her children, us, were an afterthought. Nan barely paid attention to us unless she wanted something. My mom, despite all her hard work, never got the praise or love she deserved. The only reason she kept visiting Nan was because of my grandfather. She loved him dearly, and he had always been kind, fair, and supportive. When he passed away in 2004, it was like a pillar in the family collapsed. My mother was devastated, and truthfully, so was I. He had been the glue that held everything together. After the funeral, Nan decided to update her will. Both my mom and my aunt were present when she signed it, so they knew what was in it. The will stated that when Nan passed, her house would be sold and the money split, 25% each to my mom and aunt, and the remaining 50% divided evenly among the grandchildren. At the time, the house was worth over £500,000, not life-changing wealth but a meaningful inheritance. My mother didn't care much about the money, it wasn't her style, but it meant something to know her children would one day have a cushion, something to help them through life. Things started to unravel in 2010 when tragedy struck again. My mom died suddenly in an accident. She didn't have a current will and she wasn't wealthy at that point. She was renting a house and had closed her business years earlier. The only thing she had left behind were her wishes for her funeral, wishes she had told me in detail. The music, the flowers, the coffin, even the clothes people were supposed to wear. She wanted it colorful, bright, warm. She wanted people to celebrate her life, not drown in black like a cliché. But when the time came, Nan and my aunt hijacked the entire funeral. They dismissed everything I told them about my mom's wishes. They picked out flowers that weren't right, music my mom had specifically said she hated, and a coffin so hideous I can still picture it in my nightmares. My siblings and I fought them tooth and nail, and we managed to change a few things back. But some details we couldn't undo. Nan outright refused to let anyone attend in clown costumes, as she put it. She demanded black, she demanded control. It broke me because that day wasn't about Nan or my aunt, it was about my mom, and even in death her voice was silenced. After the funeral, Nan changed her will again. My aunt came to us and said she hadn't been involved in the changes, promised us that everything was fair. Nan herself reassured us that my mom's share would go directly to her kids, which made sense. It seemed like the right thing to do. For a brief moment, I believed them. But over time, I noticed something unsettling. Nan never spoke of my mom again. At first, I assumed it was grief. Maybe it was too painful for her. But as years passed, the silence only deepened. Even 5 years after my mom's death, Nan wouldn't say her name. If we tried to share a memory, Nan would shut it down, pivoting to stories about my aunt or her kids. And when I went through my own breakdown after losing my mom, when I reached out hoping for comfort, Nan dismissed me with, "Well, your aunt has had it so much worse." It was a wound on top of a wound. Not only had I lost my mother, but it felt like she was being erased. And I didn't know then just how far my aunt was willing to go, or how much my grandmother would let her. Because when Nan passed away in 2016, the truth came out. When Nan died in 2016, I didn't feel the kind of grief I expected. There was sadness, of course, she was my grandmother after all, but the loss didn't feel the same as when my mom passed. When my mom died, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. With Nan, it was more complicated. She had chosen my aunt over us so many times, ignored us when we needed her, and dismissed my mother's memory like it was an inconvenience. Still, I thought maybe, just maybe, she had kept her word. I remembered the will she'd rewritten after my mom's accident, the one that said my mother's share would go to us kids. It wasn't about the money, not for me, but for my oldest brother who was planning his honeymoon and my younger brother who was starting university. That inheritance meant the world. It was security, a helping hand, something to soften the edges of life. After the funeral, we waited patiently for news about the will. My aunt reassured us over and over, "Oh, it'll be another month before the reading, don't worry, everything's fine." I believed her at first. What reason did I have not to? She was grieving too, wasn't she? But months passed, then more months. Each time we asked, we were told the same thing: not yet, soon. It was my dad who finally uncovered the truth. By sheer coincidence, he bumped into the solicitor who had handled Nan's will. Dad asked casually how long it would take before the will was read. The solicitor blinked in surprise. "What do you mean it's already been read months ago?" That was the moment the mask slipped. Dad pressed for answers, and the solicitor admitted that my aunt had been present when the will was changed, despite swearing up and down that she'd had no involvement. The new will left everything to her, not a split, not 50% to the grandchildren, not even a token gesture to us. The house, the contents, the inheritance, all hers. When confronted, my aunt tried to deny it, but when the paperwork was shoved under her nose, she had no choice. She admitted it. And I'll never forget the smug way she showed us the will, as if she had won some game we didn't even know we were playing. The house alone was worth nearly £750,000 by then. £500,000 gone. My siblings and I, my mother's children, were written out completely. But what hurt the most wasn't the money, it was what was inside the house. My grandfather's war medals. He had served in the Second World War and had promised them to me personally before he died. They were the one thing I wanted, the one piece of him I could carry forward. When I asked my aunt about them, she sneered. "Unless you have it in writing, you'll have nothing from this house." Anyway, I already gave them to Clive. Clive, her eldest son, the screw-up, the addict, the thief, the one who had spent more time behind bars than in a steady job. My stomach dropped. I knew those medals would be gone within days, pawned off for a quick fix or some fast cash. A piece of history, a piece of my grandfather, sold to strangers because my aunt wanted to spite me. We looked into legal action. We went to lawyers, asked about contesting the will, tried to fight back. But every professional we spoke to said the same thing: unless we had undeniable proof of coercion or fraud, we didn't stand a chance. Wills are ironclad, they said, and the fact that Nan herself had signed it made it almost impossible. We were devastated. My brother's honeymoon dream evaporated. My younger brother had to take out more loans than expected. And I lost the medals I'd been promised by the only man in our family who had truly been proud of me. My aunt wasted no time putting the house up for sale. She listed it for nearly £750,000, ready to pocket everything and move closer to her daughter in the city. She strutted around town, smug and untouchable, while we swallowed the bitter pill of betrayal. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd cash out, buy her fancy new house, and vanish into her comfortable little life. But that's when karma showed up, and karma had a cruel sense of humor. I thought I'd never see justice. My aunt had stolen the house, the inheritance, the medals, everything. She walked around town like she had won, like she had outsmarted all of us. For a while, it felt like she had. She was smug, gloating, already making plans to sell the house and move closer to her daughter in the city. She thought she was untouchable. But karma has a funny way of sneaking in where lawyers and courts can't. The first sign came when the buyers sent in a surveyor. The house had been standing for over 40 years, and from the outside it looked fine. A little dated maybe, but solid enough. My aunt was already bragging about the sale, about how she was going to buy her dream house in the city, about how she'd finally leave our town behind. Then the report came back, and it was devastating. The land the house had been built on was too soft for the structure. Over the decades, it had been slowly sinking, about 2 centimeters in total since it was built. It wasn't much, and for years it hadn't been noticeable. But the survey showed that the sinking had accelerated. The house was now sinking at a rate of 1 centimeter per year. Within 3 years, it would need serious, expensive work to remain habitable. The buyers pulled out immediately. They didn't even hesitate. They walked away before putting down a deposit. The value of the house plummeted overnight. From nearly £750,000, it dropped to a pitiful £60,000, practically worthless compared to what it should have been. When I heard the news, I couldn't help but laugh. After everything she'd done, after all the gloating and the smugness, my aunt had been handed a crumbling house and a nightmare. She couldn't buy the city home she'd put a deposit on, but she still had to pay the deposit anyway. The money she thought she'd have in abundance vanished before she even touched it. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse for her, she let Clive, her train wreck of a son, move into her council house. This was a disaster waiting to happen. Clive wasn't allowed to live in council housing anymore. He'd been banned after trashing every single one he'd ever been given. When word got out that he'd moved in with her, someone reported it. The council evicted her. Just like that, she lost the roof over her head. With nowhere else to go, she had no choice but to move into the sinking house. The same house she'd stolen from us, the same house she'd thought would make her rich. And she had to live there with her useless son and her partner, trapped in a property worth barely a fraction of what it once was. For 2 years, she lived like that. Every time I saw her in town, she looked more miserable. The smugness was gone, replaced by bitterness and desperation. She would try to talk to me, maybe to soften the ice, maybe to worm her way back into some sympathy, but I had nothing to say to her. I ignored her every time. One day, though, as I was walking past her in the high street, she completely lost it. She screamed at the top of her lungs in front of dozens of people. "Your mother deserved to die for having a RARD like you." The whole street froze, people stared, I felt the blood drain from my face. It was one of the vilest things I had ever heard. Someone reported her to the police. She got an official warning and word spread like wildfire. Soon she was ridiculed on Facebook, mocked by people she once thought were her allies. Her reputation, already in tatters, disintegrated. Every time I saw her after that, she looked older, smaller, like the bitterness was consuming her from the inside out. Eventually, she managed to sell the house. Not for the fortune she dreamed of, but for a measly £85,000. It was all she could scrape together. With that, she finally left town and moved in with her daughter in the city. For a brief moment, I thought her life might improve, but karma wasn't finished with her yet, not by a long shot. When my aunt finally sold Nan's house, I thought that would be the end of her story in our lives. She made her money, not as much as she'd hoped, but enough to start over somewhere else, and she left town with her partner to move in with her daughter, Sue. Sue had a decent life for herself in the city. A 3-bedroom house, 3 kids, and enough stability to put distance between herself and the chaos she'd grown up with. But the thing about running from family dysfunction is that it has a way of finding you again, especially when your mother shows up on your doorstep with her partner, bags in hand, and nowhere else to go. At first, it was awkward but tolerable. Sue squeezed them into the smallest bedroom of the house, barely large enough for 2 people to live in, while she, her husband, and the kids tried to carry on with normal life. My aunt promised it was temporary. She promised she was looking for work, for a place to rent, for a way to contribute. But promises were all she ever had. Instead of finding a job, she spent her days at the bingo hall, pouring what little money she had left into cards and numbers, hoping for a win that never came. The money she'd gotten from the house sale, already pitiful compared to what she should have inherited, drained away quickly. Groceries, bills, bingo nights, small luxuries she couldn't resist. She didn't contribute a penny to Sue's household. Her partner didn't last long either. About a month in, he emptied what remained of her bank account and ran off, leaving her stranded. I wasn't surprised. He'd always been a leech, and I suppose even leeches get tired of clinging to a sinking ship. So there she was, 50-something years old, broke, bitter, and living in her daughter's house, bringing nothing to the table. Sue had tolerated a lot in her life, but she wasn't going to let her mother freeload forever. The tension grew day by day, until one night it all came to a head. I wasn't there, of course, but I heard the story later from one of my aunt's so-called friends. Apparently, my aunt and Sue got into a screaming match loud enough to rattle the neighbors. My aunt, in her usual cruel way, spat out the one thing guaranteed to burn the last bridge she had left. "I should have aborted you." Those were the last words she ever spoke to her daughter in that house. Sue threw her out immediately. Bags, clothes, everything dumped on the front lawn. My aunt begged, screamed, pleaded, but Sue didn't budge. She locked the door, called the police, and told them if her mother didn't leave, she'd have her removed. And that was it. No family left, no home, no money, no partner, just a woman who had burned every bridge and poisoned every relationship, standing alone in a city where she knew nobody and had nowhere to go. For a while, she couch-surfed, drifting between acquaintances and distant relatives, but people caught on quickly. She was toxic, she was bitter, and she was still the same woman she'd always been. She used people until they pushed her out. She burned bridges faster than she could build them. Eventually, she ended up in a caravan in one of the roughest parts of the city. The kind of place where hope goes to die, where people disappear into poverty and addiction and no one blinks an eye, and that's where she stayed. By then, her health had started to fail. Early onset arthritis twisted her hands, making it impossible to work. She could barely hold things, let alone do the kind of manual labor jobs available to someone with no qualifications and a record of burning every employer she ever had. For the first time in her life, she couldn't manipulate her way out, she couldn't sweet-talk her way into comfort, she couldn't lean on anyone else to save her, she was alone. And in that loneliness, she finally tasted the bitterness she'd served everyone else her whole life. But karma wasn't done yet. Because losing family, money, and health was only part of the story, the rest was watching the world laugh at her downfall. When I heard what became of my aunt, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. Part of me pitied her. She was, after all, just a bitter old woman now, broken down and living in a caravan. But another part of me, the louder part, felt an undeniable sense of justice. For years she had stolen, lied, manipulated, and poisoned everything around her. She had robbed us of an inheritance, of family heirlooms, of dignity. She had spat the most vile words at me in the middle of a busy street, words I'll never forget. Your mother deserved to die for having ****ard like you. And when people finally saw her for who she really was, she was ridiculed, laughed at, mocked on Facebook until her name became a punchline. Every time I caught glimpses of her after that, she looked smaller. Not physically, though the years and stress had clearly aged her, but spiritually, like the arrogance and smugness that once made her unbearable had drained out, leaving behind a hollow shell. Selling the house for just £85,000 was supposed to be her way out. Instead, it was her cage. It wasn't enough to buy a home in the city, and it barely lasted once her partner ran off with what little she had. Sue had cast her out, slamming the final door in her face, and all those years of playing favorites, of being spoiled by Nan, had left her with no skills, no savings, no allies. She was exactly where her choices had led her. The last I heard of her came from one of her old friends who still lived in the city. My aunt had become infamous in her little corner of the caravan park. She spent her days hobbling around, complaining about her arthritis, still managing to scrape together change for bingo nights. People mocked her behind her back, called her bitter, called her pathetic. Sometimes they said it to her face. She couldn't fight back anymore, not physically, not emotionally. She was miserable, completely, utterly miserable. And I won't lie, hearing that brought me peace. Not joy exactly. I don't think true joy can come from someone else's suffering, but peace, because for once I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to yell or prove myself or dig through records to show the truth. Life itself had handed her the punishment she had spent decades avoiding. Karma had done what the courts couldn't. Now, when I think of her, it's not with rage anymore. It's not with fear or hurt or bitterness. It's just with a quiet sense of closure. She destroyed her own life, one selfish choice at a time, until she had nothing left. And in the end, that's the only justice that really mattered.